Thank you, James Duthie, Darren Dreger, along with two former Team Canada standouts, World Championship Mike Johnson, World Juniors Jeff O'Neill. And talking to both the Canadian players and listening to the American players, you really get a sense of how big this feels to them. We weren't sure what this was going to be coming into this tournament, kind of a made-for-TV event that they never tried before. But they're talking like an Olympic game, and that matters.
It does, and I think it's also a recognition of what the Americans are now for Canada. It's their greatest rival in hockey. They're the biggest challenge, the biggest threat to being the best hockey-playing country in the world. And you would have thought coming out of Wednesday's game where the environment, the crowd, Mario, the overtime, it couldn't get any bigger. And yet across the board, they all recognize, no, the American game's going to be bigger. It's going to be louder. It's going to be more physical, more emotional, more intense, which really does set up for a pretty incredible evening.
And they both go about their business differently off the ice, James. It's pretty obvious the Americans are brash, as they always are. They come out with statements, and they seem like they're really hungry to come in here and take Canada down on their home ice. It seems like that's the mandate. They've got the Tkachuk brothers. And if the American Hockey Association, like their goal has been to create a factory where they're big, strong, athletic, guys that can skate. Man, from the World Juniors leading right up to their best men's team, that's what they've got going. They're going to be tough to beat. And Canada's going to have to elevate if they want to have success in this game tomorrow night. They can't have a Sidney Crosby spinorama, some McDavid dashes, some McKinnon dashes. All of the players have talked about the speed of the play. That should favor Canada. When you've got some of the best skating players that have ever played the game, it should favor them tomorrow night. So don't worry about the Tkachuks and scrums and physicality. Those guys are going to have to dominate from start to finish.
Easier said than done, though, when it gets going that physical, because I think the game will feel a little bit different than the Swedish game. It will be more physical.
I'm looking forward to the pace, Canada versus the USA. Hey, we all knew that there was going to be a competitive edge in this Four Nations face-off, just given the level of talent and the level of compete with the individual players. But I had a quick conversation with Sidney Crosby earlier, and he said the one thing that surprised him in Game 1 against Sweden, and then that followed up in the American game against Finland, was how fast it is. And he equates it to a Stanley Cup final. And we're having that conversation in February. So imagine how quick it's going to be tomorrow night.
It's not like Canada, Jimmy, is going to shy away from the physicality. You've got Sam Bennett coming into the lineup. And imagine him on a line with Brad Marchand. Those two have history together. And those two teaming up on the same line should be something for Canada.
Well, how about Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk ending up in the corner together? Which, I mean, there's so many possibilities with this. You mentioned the change with Bennett coming in for Travis Konechny. The other potentially major change for Canada is if Kale Makar can't go. He's sick right now. John Cooper kind of hesitated and then used the word confident to describe chances of playing. What do we know about Makar, and what do we know about how they will replace him if they have to?
Well, I'll throw another word into the mix, and that's questionable. And that's, how you fairly categorize Kale Makar going into Saturday night's contest. Now, the hope from a Canadian perspective is that he makes some sort of miraculous recovery and he's good to go. It sounds like they do have a bit of a flu bug in the room right now. So we'll see if other players will be impacted. Thomas Harley is in Montreal or making his way, and he's listed as an emergency player. So the only way he can come in the mix and onto the roster is if Canada goes down 2 defensemen. So Shea Theodore is out, so it would take Kale Makar waking up in the morning and saying, I'm no good, for Thomas Harley to be able to participate in the morning skate. That's how regimented things are between the league and the Players Association.
This whole story is so strange, though, in that sometimes common sense has to prevail. Like, just take a step back. It's a new tournament, new rules. You can rewrite them anytime you want. So you're going to have a guy fly in. If he's here, I understand you can't activate him unless Makar doesn't play, but let him practice. What's the big deal? This is not like a minor hockey tournament. Just put another guy on the roster. It doesn't matter. No one's going to complain. There's no real advantage gained by having a 7th defenseman available in practice. It feels like, because it's sort of last minute, there's a lot of scrambling around how this is going to work, but it feels like it should be pretty simple. Just if he's here, put him on ice and morning skate. If he has to play, then he plays.
I want you to clarify, just because I want people overreacting when you say flu bug going around the room. It's not like 6 guys were throwing up. I mean, we watched that practice, and they were all flying out there. And by the way, what were we in the room for if there was any sort of flu bug going around the room?
Seriously. I stay out of any room with a flu bug.
So Makar is the only one who's truly sick. Were you caught off guard by the speed and intensity of the practice?
There was about 20 minutes more than I would have wanted if I was a player out there. And you could tell just by John Cooper.
But is that just you?
No, I
or
thought
anyone?
going into the
He's not alone.
practice game, I thought going into the practice that was going to be 25 minutes of 2-on-1s, flow drills, get a feel for the puck. But John Cooper was out there barking. He was banging his stick on the boards, and it was all business. There was D-zone stuff. There was attention to detail stuff. There was an emphasis on defensemen joining the play. They covered it all out there, and it was intense for a day before a game practice.
Joking with some of the players after the practice, I'm like, when was the last time you did 5-on-5 in-zone defensive drills, sort of full contact in practice? And they're like, training camp. Like, it's just something players don't do during the regular season because they don't have time, they don't have the energy, but they've had a bit of both. But also the attention to detail. You talk about defensive zone rotations they're trying to work on, neutral zone quick ups they do a lot of, and deactivation, as you picked up on right away. They're trying to be aggressive and fast, knowing what's coming against the Americans.
The Canadians have won the last 3 best-on-best meetings, 2010 gold medal game, 2014 semifinals, that 1-0 game, and 2016 game in the World Cup. But the vast majority of these Americans were part of none of these, and they're out to show that it's a different era for American hockey.